Hey everyone, it's your host Mark D'Amico. Welcome back for another episode of View From The Rafters, behind the scenes with the Boston Celtics. Today's episode is all about scouting. What do scouts go through on a daily basis? What are the stories that they experience traveling not only around the U.S. to find players for the Celtics, but traveling around the world to find players to come and play for the Boston Celtics? Let me tell you, they've got some crazy stories. And on this episode, Sean Grandy and I are sitting down with Assistant General Manager Austin Ainge. We've got one of our scouts, Ashley Battle, who is one of the only female black scouts in the entire NBA. Some of you in New England will know her name very well, winning a couple championships at Juhann for the women's team. And then we're going to wrap up with a conversation with Celtics international scout Benas Matkevicius. And let me tell you, he's got some wild stories about what he has experienced going to some games overseas. Every Tuesday, new episodes will be dropping on your favorite podcast platform. And every Wednesday, we'll have new episodes on the Celtics YouTube page. So make sure you subscribe, rate, review us. We appreciate you listening and watching. Without further ado, here it is. Here's our conversation with not only Austin Ainge and Ashley Battle, but wrapping up with Benas Matkevicius. All right, so Austin Ainge, Ashley Battle, the whole purpose of this podcast episode is to get an inside look at what you're all doing on the road and like the craziness that's associated with that. So Austin, I know you've been doing this forever. 1 million miles logged on flights, probably stayed in thousands of hotel rooms at this point. Let's just jump right in. What's the craziest story that you can tell us from your travel adventures over the years?
I've got a number. Europe is usually where the real fun happens. Mario Hezonja, I was here scouting him when he was playing for Barcelona. And I went to watch a game in Athens, Greece of his, and Barcelona was up early, and someone called in a bomb threat. And I didn't know what was going on there, speaking Greek over the loudspeakers and everything. And
it's all Greek to you.
I grabbed an agent. It's like, hey, what is going on? He goes, oh, don't worry. This happens if the gamblers are down and they're worried. They just stop the momentum, and so they evacuated us all.
We're heading in the NBA? Oh God!
They pull us all out for 40 minutes. Let bomb sniffing dogs do a loop, and then they bring us all back in. But they don't check tickets on the way back in, so it's just like a mass hysteria running around. But that's the fun.
Did the momentum stop?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Panathinaikos made a little bit. Yeah.
Did they wind up flipping and the other team won?
I don't even.
They at least covered.
I don't even remember.
Did you make a note of how Mario responded to the adversity of a bomb threat being called in?
It was really just kind of boring, but it was scary for a minute until everyone, I looking around, everyone just thought it was routine. This is just what we do.
No worries.
Everyday thing. So, for the people who don't know, I mean, before I met you guys, before I worked in this industry, I probably would have envisioned this scout is on the road, sitting in, down by the court, having their own section, nice layout. A lot of times you're just in the crowd, right? So in that scenario, is that what the experience was? Were you just sitting in a normal seat?
Ashley can talk about this too, but it's totally random how different venues, college, G League, NBA, Europe, all these different leagues and teams treat visiting scouts, right? Sometimes you sit on the front row and they treat you like a VIP, and
no, there's no front row anymore.
Don't worry. Yeah. Sometimes you're on the upper deck. I remember one time I was going to scout Marcus Smart at Oklahoma State, and all the scouts, they gave us a seat on the upper deck. I'm like, I can't see. I need to watch this guy. We have a big high.
Yeah.
I need to see. I snuck down in the student section, and I was jumping with the fans. I stood up the whole way just so I could get a better.
How old were you at that time? Did you fit in?
How long has Smart been with us?
8 years ago?
8 years, so it's probably 9 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, early 30s for you. You could have fit in.
Whatever.
You're just getting your master's.
Whatever it takes. I've jumped fences in Italy to get in games, whatever it takes. Sometimes the credential's not there. You got to see the game.
Have you ever called in a bomb threat if you were late?
Tried to stop momentum a few times.
File that away for really desperate measures.
Ashley, what's the one that you've got in the chamber for us here?
Craziest stories. I mean, I haven't been doing this as long as Austin, so I haven't had any bomb threats yet, but...
You're mostly domestic too,
yes,
right?
I'm mostly domestic. So mine has just been flight coordination and trying to get to a place on time versus not making it at all. Earlier last year, Christmas time, there was that huge snowstorm that was taking over the Midwest. I was in Vegas at G League Showcase trying to get back to the East Coast. And I called to change my flight, and they were like, "Oh, did you call to change because of the weather?" I'm like, "What weather?" Because you have no clue what's going on really on the outside. You're just like, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
Like, the weather.
Because you're dialed in.
Because you're dialed into what you're doing. And I'm like, wait, there's a snowstorm. I'm like, when is this supposed to hit? So now I'm like trying to be a meteorologist and try to figure out like, okay, if I leave at this time, I could get to Pittsburgh at this time and I'll miss all the weather. So long story short, I went to change my flight. They changed it for the wrong day. So it's the day of the flight that I think I'm leaving on, and I'm like figuring out like, can you change my flight back to like change it to this date? You changed it to the wrong date. The lady's yelling at me. I'm like, actually, I'm pretty calm right now. I understand. We just did some improv. So I'm like, yes, and so I'm like, yes, I understand your frustration. However, I'd really like for you to change my flight. That would be really
Did she change it?
She did, and I made it home in time. Just the weather.
You didn't get stuck
I didn't
in
get
the
stuck.
rough. I mean, extra time in Vegas is no one would want that.
Man, I mean, 4 days in Vegas, not seeing sunlight,
That's a
you
limit.
might be ready to go.
They shouldn't let people stay in Vegas for more than 3 days. You should have to leave. You should, after a while.
Have you gone out there for the entire summer league before?
I've never made it.
Okay.
Can't.
Yeah, because I have
days or
multiple times, and like 10 days in Vegas.
Brutal.
Especially
Brutal.
when you may or may not be partaking in extracurricular activities, not just the work portion. That can be a long time in Las Vegas. That I can confirm.
I'm not a party guy anyway, but for me, those days in Vegas, I'm toast. Like just the work part. I'm saying it's whatever.
'Cause it's-
eight
exactly,
games and 10 meetings with people, and those are long days for us.
Because
Really.
free agency, exactly.
Your G League team, you're usually hiring staff and interviewing, and there's just a ton
nonstop.
It's just like any, a lot of people out there, I'm sure, have conferences for work, big conventions or whatever. That's the feel.
So you have all of that, and then you have other people who are just there who are trying to network and get a job. So it becomes a lot. Vegas is a lot.
Everyone in your field has these crazy travel stories. And there's a mythology to what you do, from Red going to see Havlicek at Ohio State, right, and then walking out, these long trips to find a player in the middle of nowhere. It makes me wonder this. We are in an unprecedented age of video. I can watch, my son is 11, he plays hockey, we're on the road, I'm calling our game. I can watch his game from 3,000 miles away. What is the inherent value of seeing somebody live when now you could literally watch almost anything that player has done in a game or a practice for years?
Well, there's a lot that you could get from seeing somebody live. I mean, sometimes when you're watching on TV, how tall they really are, their length, how they're actually moving, some of that sometimes get misconstrued. But when you see somebody live, you can see their mannerisms, how they interact with their teammates. You can get intel from their coaching staff. I mean, there's a lot of, advantages of seeing somebody live versus, always watching it on film.
It's a great question, Sean, and we talk about it all the time, the trade-offs, because you can be more efficient at home. It's, travel's expensive, and it's a lot, and we can watch...
Bomb threats?
Yeah, bomb threats. We can watch every game they've ever played, and we have programs that we can watch there. I want to watch three-pointers in the fourth quarter, the last 5 games, and just click play, and they'll play them in a row. Like, you can get very granular if you want, but a big part of our travel is what Ashley alluded to is kind of our intel gathering. If you go meet and establish rapport and relationships with coaches and people around the league, you get a lot more in person than cold calls. So, we want to know, does the kid work hard? Does he stay out of trouble off the court? How's he do in the weight room? How does he do out of timeout plays? All these things that, you can watch and see, but you can get a lot of info from staff.
Sean, before we follow up on that, I want to ask you the exact same thing, because for a couple of years, you had to experience doing things remote. So how did things change when you are there in person for what you're doing?
I see my kid less. It was, I think, all of us during the pandemic, right? No matter what field we're in, what we're doing, we found a way to make our jobs work. And then you don't realize when you go back to doing it the way it's supposed to be done, it's like, age-old dated reference, but going back to color from black and white in The Wizard of Oz, like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. You're seeing it again. And crazy things in my job where all of a sudden I'm dependent on seeing whatever they put on a camera in front of me.
And nothing else.
For example, when they used the wrong feed one night, we had a Turner game. So instead of getting the wide camera feed of the game, I got what's called the ISO camera, which is somebody zooming in.
On
literally
just
on
one
somebody's
player.
face. So when the beard was dribbling, all I could see was the beard. So you could not, that's the reason I asked about seeing somebody live. I often, back in the days when we would sit courtside, you'd sit next to the advanced scout.
Right.
Team is playing a Celtics, and you say, man, you can watch literally every game exactly as you described it. You can break down every play. I ask this of Joe sometimes when we're playing a team on a back-to-back.
Mm-hmm.
When you're used to watching a team with the video breakdown, but you can watch them live, do you watch it live, and how is it different, even just watching a game on TV? So that's why I'm always fascinated how people take in the information.
It's just like we're investing millions of dollars, the opportunity cost on top of that, and we all want to win. So you have these high stakes, and it's scary to invest that type of resources into a person without at least seeing them a couple times.
Yeah.
It's just that there's also that peace of mind on top of all the intangible things we're talking about.
That's the other interesting thing to me, though, for what you two do and the rest of your group, for that matter. And Benas, he's coming on later in this episode, but you don't know what the payoff is going to be for all of the work that you're putting in. I'm sure you put in thousands of hours on players coming into the draft, or even around the league,
Even when we don't have a draft pick.
Exactly. That's my whole point. Is like,
Right.
I guess, how do you parse that out and figure out how much time to invest in X, Y, and Z versus?
You just got to know all the best players, and that payoff comes guaranteed, right? This is the trade deadline week when we're recording this. We will have hundreds of conversations about these guys, and every team in the league calls and checks in. You talk about different things, and you just bounce ideas, and you need to know all those guys, whether they're on your team or not, and you need to have a general idea. You can always do some last minute research, but sometimes the trade deadline, there's an hour to go and you get a call. You can't go back and watch film, or on draft night, there's 30 seconds till the next pick. You got to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so that research is there. And even if, let's say I'm watching a kid at a local school here and he doesn't get drafted, he'll go in the G League or he'll go play in Europe, and 3 years from now he'll get better and he'll have a great year in Spain, and I'll need to know him. And if I don't have that baseline, it's starting from zero and it's harder. So all of that work does pay off. It's just not always immediate.
Right.
You mentioned earlier, prior to me kind of diverting our conversation here, you mentioned kind of the intel part of this whole thing. Take us inside. What is that collection process like? Who do you need to talk to get that intel? And then associated with that, the relationship development that you need to make with probably hundreds and hundreds of people around the country, for you around the world, to be able to have information that you trust.
Right. Well, my experience is probably a little bit different than Austin's right now, because I'm still very new to this and still building out, people that I know and the relationships that I'm building. So mine is literally like a cold call. Hey, it's Ashley Battle for the Celtics. I'm here to, usually when people hear the Celtics, they kind of be like, okay, they kind of relax a little bit.
They're not calling to change their long distance.
Right. Right. Exactly. So, but you're just, asking questions, similarly to what Austin said earlier, just really trying to get a good idea of who this person is. And that can come from literally anybody. It could come from the managers. It could come from the coaching staff. It could come from coaches. I mean, it can literally come from anybody that has a relationship with this player.
It's a small world, basketball world. We get to know a lot of the same people. I joke that I travel the entire world and see the same 40 guys, or everywhere I go. So you do get to know a lot of people, and none of this is to say that we just take some assistant coach's word, because they don't always know. We just take their perspective and we put it in with our own perspective and multiple other sources, and we just try to get as clear a picture as you can. And then in the end, you're still trying to guess how a 19-year-old will react to the NBA game and millions of dollars. It's still it's an educated guess in the end.
Is this why it's so important to have new voices in the room coming from different places?
Absolutely. We have a good mix of continuity and new voices, and you're always trying to learn. I mean, we're always trying to talk to people and how they do things, and I've had dinner with all these guys on the road and long drives. Sometimes we'll carpool, different scouts and execs, just, hey, we're all going the same place, and you just talk and exchange ideas, and there's definitely some new perspectives. Ashley has played in completely different leagues. She's played all over the world in the WNBA, and has a very good insight on stuff that things I wouldn't have seen.
This is the one that was been killing me ever since we decided we were going to sit down and do this. So, Ashley, you're sitting in a room with a bunch of other people who, in the quote-unquote real world, are completely unemployable. All right, we are pretty much have useless day-to-day skills. We have stumbled into sports because we couldn't do anything else. You made a conscious choice to leave the real world. You actually had an actual professional job with adults, and yet you chose to step back into this world. Why?
With non-adults?
That's putting it kindly.
This has always been where I wanted to be. Like, I knew for years now I wanted to be on the team side. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. So it took for me going into banking, going into financial planning, working at the league office, going to Nike to finally make it here. So, and everyone's journey is different. I mean, I also, have an extensive basketball background, but everyone's journey is different. I mean, we have someone who just came from college who's came straight over. So you can come out that way, or you could take the long way like I did to get over here. But, this is where I've always wanted to be. And, I'm fortunate to be able to do that here with the Celtics.
Is that reinforced more because you spent that time doing other things that it feels more like home when you come back to it?
Oh man, it's been great. It has really been great. I think the way my career ended on an injury, like a lot of athletes, and I was bitter. I was really bitter about the game and about just how things ended. And it took me a while to really, find my love for basketball again. And when I did that, I was like locked in, like this. All right, like I don't know why I stepped away for so long, but this is it. This is what I want to do. And it's great having people who believe in you, who know what your worth is, what your value is, and what you can bring to the table. And then you have to believe in that as well. And if you're confident in what you have to do and what you have to say, then you'll be able to get it done.
Did you get to play lunchtime pickup at your investment banking?
No. I used to leave and go to the Y though, play some pickup in the morning before work.
Lunch hour?
Before work I used to go. And in Pittsburgh I would play we'd play at like 6 or something like that in the morning before work.
Actually,
there's going to be a podcast about the Joe Mazzulla pickup game, right?
Oh, there has.
That will be one day. That'll be a 30 for 30 about the human beings that have been destroyed mentally and physically.
or something from that one. Be careful in your audience.
Scal's not the same. He is not the same man.
I played with him once. I was like, yeah, I'm good.
That's the first time I've ever seen a coach miss action because of his pickup games. I've never seen that.
Devin Booker said, "Hey, we don't double and pickup." Nope. He's not playing in Joe's defense.
We just tackle.
Yeah. Ashley, you came on the podcast last year during Women's History Month, and I know you talked about wanting to be able to lift other people like you,
right,
because there aren't a lot of female black scouts in the league. How many are there that you are aware of?
At least 4 now.
It's a small number.
It's a small number.
It's a very small number. It was probably even smaller when you started.
For sure.
What does that mean to you?
For sure. I just think, there's a lot of diversity that's happening. There's a lot of, people who understand that even though, we're women, but we still know basketball. Essentially basketball is basketball. And we have, a great mind for it. So why not, add somebody in who has a different perspective, who has a different sees the game a little bit differently, because obviously basketball is basketball, but the men's game is different than the women's game. And so it's great to see other teams investing in women, bringing them in the front office, bringing them in on the coaching staff. It's been really great to see, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more transition in the future with that.
When you were in 5th grade, you were playing against boys.
Yep.
And you talked about how you had all these skills, but they would just play bully ball against you, right? Does the equivalent of that still exist to some degree for women who are trying to break into different areas of traditionally male-dominated fields?
I mean, I could see how people could feel like that. It's hard. I mean, I'm the only female in a room full of men, and we're talking about basketball. So sometimes, you kind of feel like, dang, all right, well, no, I know you've done your work. You have to be confident in what you've done and the work that you've put in, and just speak about that. Like we're all taking estimated guesses on the projection of how we think this guy is going to.
You've got to tell the future.
Right. You have to tell the future. And so, but you've put the work in, and that goes with anything, whether I was playing basketball as a kid or whether I was playing basketball at UConn or in the WNBA. I had to put the work in to be successful. And it's the same thing with this.
I know we're talking figurative bullying here, but she lowers her shoulder and takes out our analytics people down on the court. She is not scared to bully them right back.
I was going to ask you if she ever feels like a fish
You
out of
seem
water.
proud of this. I like it.
That's true.
What is it like for you to be next to someone that played defense? Is that intimidating to
Actually,
you?
we're
Or
undefeated.
is that a different...
Ashley and I don't lose.
We don't lose together.
So
Seriously.
Who are you playing?
Brad, Jay, got to throw Brad under the bus there.
Austin, you interviewed Ashley.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you when this woman walked into the room and you started to have a basketball conversation about this position?
Yeah, just passion, IQ, EQ, right? These are things we look at. It's a hard job to learn. I mean, Ashley can talk about how it at least for me, the first few years felt like you're drinking from a fire hose because there's so many players. It's a whole world, right? Like at this point, I'm only learning the new players each year and updating small bits of the other players. When you first start, it's just, NBA, G League, Europe, college, it's just thousands of players, and we're having these meetings and there's so many names. It's overwhelming to start. So we don't usually worry too much about that aspect because that can be learned. It's not brain surgery. It's love for the game, intelligence, and ability to work in a team, and general basketball knowledge and feel. And those were the things that we liked about Ashley.
In every other field connected to sports, you think of players have talent and then there's hard work. Broadcasters have talent and then there's hard work. All of the elements. To be a referee, you have to have some talent for it and whatever. Are there levels of talent in scouting? Are there scouts who can see things that others can't? It's looking at it, another field from afar, you say, are there talented people? Because obviously the hard work is inherent. It's obvious. Are there levels of talent in what you do and having an eye for it?
It's a big issue of contention. There's a lot of different opinions on that. You've got
the people who aren't as good as it think that there are levels and that they're at the top.
we all think we're better than we are, right?
Exactly.
But even that, there's so I don't know if we've determined that, Sean. I believe so, but I think I think there's different.
You talk about it as an art, which that connected with me because I have a overinflated sense of what I do as being important and it being an art, and that's what made me think of it, because there are people in my field. There's going to be, you can't be successful in what I do if you're not putting in the work, but there is a difference, and that's what made me wonder. All the people you've been around in the game, almost by definition, think actually the people you've been around, coaches, scout, anybody in the front office, there must be people that see the game differently, like a great piano player can just see the keys and play.
Right.
It has to be.
There is, and if you come from coaching and going into the front office, like I think you probably see the game a little bit differently than if you haven't played versus, going into the front office as well. So there's nuances I think that people inherently have about the game for themselves, and maybe that kind of gets a little bit exploited a little bit, where you're just like, okay, well, or enhanced, like these are the things that I like to focus on, and these are the things that I think can contribute to make a successful NBA player. I've found that a lot of people, that I've encountered over the last couple of years have been, a lot of people kind of think similarly about a guy. There may be a couple things here and there where you're just like, no, I don't believe that about this person, but for the most part, I think especially the top guys, people know.
There's quite a lot that we do that maybe isn't as obvious to people outside. We have salary cap, we have scouting in person, we have scouting on film, we have gathering information from networking various sources, we have anticipating how that person does, not in a vacuum, but how they fit with other teams, right? We have managing people, we have communicating with agents. There's a lot of skills, and it'd be crazy to think that there weren't strengths and weaknesses within every front office person on those various levels, and I've left out a few. So some people are better at certain aspects of that, just like players can be better at shooting, passing, dribbling, defense, whatever. So it's all important to find the right team together. As much as any one person's strengths and weaknesses, it's got to fit, and we've got to have the right recipe.
And that's a big and interesting part of this, is that you're not just looking at basketball players, you're looking at basketball people, and there's a lot that goes into that you're talking about, of talking to these sources who can give you information about who are these people really on a day-to-day basis. This is a really interesting thing that I want to post to both of you, is that I've done some scouting stuff for our website over the years. I coached football when I was in college, and I found that when I was in it like that on a day-to-day basis of looking at hours of film or coaching, that it was hard to turn that off. And then I found myself walking around always kind of assessing everyone around me, kind of in that same way. Is it hard for you to turn off like that scouting vision of constantly assessing things and people and everything that's going on around you?
A little bit. We make jokes all the time about sitting in an airport and go, oh, that guy looks just like...
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Or he's +2 wingspan for sure.
He's going to Sbarro. He's going to go right and grab that.
Yeah, we make jokes like that. But certainly that at the very most stressful times of any job, it's hard to turn the brain off. Sitting at dinner, like, all right, I need to focus on my family, not, what can I get for a second round pick? These are always challenges.
Have you found that?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I'm not married or anything, so I never turn it off. So it's always like when I'm with my friends or I'm hanging out or something like that, I have to be like, okay, I'm not going to talk about basketball. I'm not going to talk about, sports in general. I'm really going to just sit here and just try to be present and be in the moment. And if it comes up, then I'll dive in and go on a tangent, but I try to leave basketball here.
Can you watch a game as a fan anymore?
No.
Does it get...
That's what I'm getting at too. It's just hard to turn it off.
It ruins your fandom, really.
Yeah, it does.
I'm so spoiled now. I think of, Duke, North Carolina game. My friends are like, that's so awesome. I just think about the traffic and the hassle to park. I'd rather see Duke against UNC Charlotte. It's way easier in and out. So that you get spoiled with that stuff.
This is a perfect segue, though, because I want to ask about a movie that came out within the last year or so, Hustle.
Mm-hmm.
And
Brad Stevens.
Yeah, Brad's got the beautiful cameo in there.
He's gonna get a $6 check for the next 2 years.
We've done that.
Cedric Maxwell talks about his all the time.
Yeah,
my dad's got one from Space Jam. He gets like $5. Yeah,
gotta love it. But yeah, so that movie and that Adam Sandler's role in that movie is kind of like he couldn't turn it off, and he just happened to find this diamond in the rough that wound up becoming this star player who walked around this facility.
Well, we had, by the way.
I don't know how we let the star player.
And we had during the filming of that, which was interesting.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
During the filming, we had Wancho. But I would say the inaccuracies of that is everyone knows all the players now, as Sean alluded to, with video, and you follow the right people on Twitter. you'll know about everyone. So our job is not beating the bushes, finding some guy in a playground in Spain, like the movie. It's really just choosing between the list that everyone has. Now, it's not going to be the same as the ones you find online, but most teams are going to have. Right? Giannis was probably the most undiscovered because he had citizenship issues that prevented him from playing on the junior national teams and stuff all growing up. But usually if you're not in the top 12 18-year-olds in Spain or in Lithuania or something, you're probably not on NBA radar, right? The depth is not so great that you're not going to be on those teams. So
how much has that changed though, like since you've been in this landscape and really since your dad got here back in the early 2000s? Because at that time there wasn't all this film available of literally everyone and anyone. It's
changed a lot. I mean, we were calling teams, begging them to FedEx DVDs across the country. You're right. And now I can literally pull up any game in the world on my laptop. So it has changed quite a bit, but that has made the world smaller. It is easier. It's harder to find diamonds in the rough in remote places. But the late night fast food in the hotel room is accurate. I do that way too often.
How much has the G League changed maybe a diamond in the rough becoming more of a diamond that you would not have become one without it?
I would say that even more than the G League expanding is the economic crisis. The European basketball hasn't recovered since 2008, 2009. Spain, Greece, Italy, the salaries for players over there has greatly reduced, and that has pushed a lot more players to the G League. They still could make a little more money in Europe often, but the chance at a call-up, the gap isn't so big. The guaranteed money they're turning down isn't so big. So that, as much as anything, has pushed the G League deeper and deeper, and then two-way contracts made it even more. Mm-hmm. And so that has made a little easier sometimes scouting. There's more players that are around U.S. that we can go see.
We're bringing on Benas Matkevicius next on the podcast right after this.
He'll correct his name 4 times. You almost got it.
He didn't do it. Okay. He didn't do it. Can you tell me correctly how to say the last name?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No chance.
I just call him B.
Okay, just B.
Big Bad.
Sure.
Big Bad.
B for sure. You're the man who discovered him,
yeah.
Right? You're the one who made the connection with him. What do we need to know about Benas for our listeners who are about to hear our conversation with him?
Benas was very unique. I met him at a junior tournament in Wrocław, Poland.
Wherever that is.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Good luck, Siri, getting you there. Yeah. Siri, where is it? I don't know.
Met him there, and then we exchanged info, and then I ended up spending some time with him at the old Treviso Euro camp, which no longer exists, and just picked his brain and got to know him. He was doing some advanced scouting, some coaching, and some personnel scouting for CSKA Moscow at the time. And found out he was a coach's son who grew up playing, and he had a bunch of injuries, which he claims hurt his career. I don't think he was very good. You can tell him that. But
have you studied the film?
Yeah, no, he was pretty good. I just like messing with him. But Benas is the most detailed guy. He's the only guy who I have to beg to take a vacation and stop watching under 16B Euro Championship, like just.
He wants to find that.
And he works so hard, and we're very grateful to have him.
Well, we're looking forward to that.
We talk. This is I was dying to know from Ashley, because we all have our own perspective that we bring in, and we talked about it from a personal standpoint, from a player standpoint. I've worked with Cedric Maxwell now for 21 years, and he was a player when he played for the Celtics. He had to sublimate his game, essentially. He was playing with Larry Bird, and he was playing with Robert Parrish, and he became that fourth guy. Does the career path you had, you could have gone to Penn State and scored 20 points a game, but you went to UConn and played with a bunch of great players, and you had to change your game. You developed a reputation as a defensive player, even though you could score, because that was what you needed to be.
Right. Does
that perspective, having come through that as a player, does it make it easier for you to see the players that are doing that same thing?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like, it definitely comes in handy, because sometimes, I also look at, hey, this kid wouldn't have made it this far if they didn't have some Can I cuss?
Absolutely.
They didn't have any shit in their game, and I always felt like, me as a player where, I knew I could score, I knew I could do all those things. I still had over 1,000 points at UConn, but that always gets overlooked. Like, oh, she can't shoot, she can't do this, she can't do that. And I'm like, well, I can.
Just didn't.
I can, but it was within our best interests, of the team. Literally, we're coming in after winning a national championship. I'm a freshman. Diana's also a freshman.
Taurasi, for those who are listening and don't know.
That one.
She's like Chardonnay or whatever. That's just one name.
Yeah,
Diana's Diana.
And so you're coming and you're just like, one of the questions Gino asked me when I was being recruited was like, are you concerned about playing time? And I was like, no, I'm not concerned about playing time because I know that I'm going to do what you ask. I'm going to work really hard and you're going to have to play me. You're not going to have a choice but to play me. And so, I look at this as, very similarly, like, I'm learning something new pretty much every day. I'm looking at guys every day and I know that like guys could still have a long career, if they're doing the intangibles on the court, which is what I had to do on the court to play.
You relate to players with no speed, same way? Like, same, you have that just inherent.
We joke all the time that, most of us played at some level. Not most of us weren't as good as Ashley, but half the time it's players like to scout players opposite of them. And some like the players just like them. And
Which one are you?
I'm usually, I like the way more athletic guys.
He really does like the more athletic. It's like, nah, he can't
Austin
play.
was the 3. He was lacking the D. It wasn't 3 and D, it was just 3. He was a 3.
He was playing D yesterday, though. He was getting
Oh, all right.
D last night.
Did that lead to the victory for you two?
We actually were all opposite teams
Oh.
yesterday. That was the first time for us. It was a little different.
Can you fall in love with a player and all the analytics could be studying everything you have studied. You studied hours of film. You studied the analytics. Everything says, I don't know. But you just have that. Do you have to get away from that? Is that why you need a room full of people to sometimes, pull somebody back to reality?
Absolutely. We all have guys that we get in, and we encourage not to have, that's my guy. Don't use that. It's not your guy. He's a guy that is available to everyone. And you can't get too locked in because you can overpay. You got to properly rate all these things. So it's something we fight against. But it happens, and you do. We have analytics group that's amazing that is checks and balances with everything we do, and we have a big group of people with great opinions that we all fight and talk about these players. But every year, Sean, there are guys that you just, let's just say out of 60 in the draft, there's maybe 4 or 5 that you really like and you really feel like you have. And some years there's just like, man, I don't really have a great feel for this guy. It could go any way and I don't know. And it's hard to it just kind of happens differently every year.
I got to say, from those few years that we were doing the draft profile series when I was scouting some players for the website, I still track them. And I'm still like, that's my guy.
That's human nature.
Like if he went 6 and I thought he should have gone 3, I'm still like,
let's redo the draft.
I'm voting and I'm rooting for that player for the rest of his career. I can't let go of it.
And we all have that tendency, but when you have to quantify it and okay, well, so what does that mean?
Yeah,
you want to trade 2 seconds to move up to get him. You want to trade 2 firsts. You want to trade an all-star. Like at what point is he your guy, right? And that usually brings people down to earth.
That it really does. Like last year, they were like, "Would you do that?" I was like, "No, absolutely not."
And that's the life of scouting and basketball operations. That's why it takes the fun out of fandom.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's why you can't watch the games as a fan because it's all you have to try to fight your emotions and get more analytical on it.
It's a difficult process, but you two have to navigate it every single day, as does Benas. Benas is going to come on next, but thank you both for coming on. We appreciate the time. I know everyone's really going to enjoy this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So Benas, man, thank you for coming on first and foremost from across the world. I never know where the hell you are in the world. Where are you right now? It looks like you're at home, but tell all the listeners, where's home base for you?
Thanks for having me, first of all. Thanks for the invite. Right now I'm in Berlin, Germany, but a lot of times I don't know where I'm at myself. So I wake up in so many different cities a lot of times, and sometimes I also visit family and friends in Lithuania. But as you know, and I think as a lot of scouts experience, or also some advanced scouts, I'm sure, have a lot of stories to tell when they wake up in hotel rooms that they don't know where they're at.
I've been there. I mean, just traveling with the team during the regular season, that happens all the time, where I'm like, I go to the room number of the prior hotel that I was at, and then I'm like, oh,
Classic.
wait, that was the last city I was in.
Classic. Yeah, no, that I have the same problem, but it's just that when I wake up in the middle of the night, I have to go to the bathroom, and I just remember the bathroom has to be here, and it's not here for some reason. And then I remember, okay, that was 2 days ago.
You're walking into a wall instead of the bathroom.
Yeah, because you have your eyes closed and everything. I mean, it's a disaster sometimes. But yeah, I'm sure everybody in this business has experienced something like that.
No question about it. So I think from my research says that you started with the Celtics back in 2014. Is that right?
Yes.
And
yes.
And that happened after you and Austin just happened to run into each other at some point when both of you were in the same city, right? Tell me about that story and how you and Austin Ainge wound up connecting and how it kind of blossomed into you being the international scout for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, so that's a classic sliding door moment, and absolutely, I always look back on that moment, and I think how my life would have turned out if I wouldn't have sat in that small gym at that same moment in Poland at the under-18s tournament at the most random time, because I was working for a European club at CSKA Moscow, and I just decided without looking forward to sign anybody young at that point, because CSKA doesn't sign any young players. I just wanted to go scout for myself. So I went there basically just to have experience in scouting young guys. So it was the most random situation. I went there, I sat down, and I saw Austin. At that time, I didn't know him, 3 rows down, standing up, watching the game, or watching as it was a break. He came up to me, and he just shook my hand, introduced himself, and that was my connection, and that was my first NBA connection, basically. And we stayed in touch, and that was 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And so we stayed in touch over that time, and then 3 years later, there was an offer that I couldn't refuse, basically. And there was some changes in Moscow happening during those times, and I got the honor to work with also Coach Messina, who's a well-known coach in the NBA and in Europe. And then after there was another turnover, Austin made an offer, and that was the start of it. I believe that was Marcus Smart's draft year.
Okay.
So I wasn't working that draft, but I was already in the room. I was already around because I signed it in the summer before. When the season ended, I joined the club right away, and that was for me something that where the whole world changed for me, basically.
And since then, I mean, probably millions of flight miles that you've traveled, like all over the world. I mean, I see you occasionally over here in the U.S. I see you at some games when you're kind of popping around and doing some scouting over here in the U.S. But I know that you are bumping around to basically in touching feet in every country around the world. What's the craziest travel story that's happened to you during all of those travel miles that you've logged?
So there's, like night to night, day to day, you just hopping around from plane to taxi to Uber to the hotel and then back and forth. Last year, you Google Maps, for just to get back on the mileage part, Google Maps gives you a report of every year or sometimes every month, depending if you let them track you or not. I let them track me, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just just because it's of interest. So I traveled last calendar year, 4.5 times around the world. And
did you ever sleep?
There's obviously, yeah, I did sleep, but there was also some personal trips involved there. Obviously, It's not all Celtics, but that just paints a picture of how much I'm on the road.
How many miles is that, Benas?
It was over 200,000, I think. It was something like that
in one calendar year.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
Part of me feels like you're proud of it, though, like that you're able to get through that. Yeah.
I am health conscious, so it's not like I'm really just doing the mindlessly. So I try not to schedule early morning flights where you have to wake up, go to sleep late, wake up early, and then fly again. And sometimes you can't avoid it, so you just go there on 2 hours, 3 hours of sleep, to an airport that's 2 hours or an hour outside of the city because of the longer distances in some cities. But I don't have any crazy stories from traveling because it's just a blur a lot of times. But I have stories of experiences in arenas that you can't really explain if you're not there personally. And
well, I'm going to need you to try to explain one right now.
Yeah, I would urge everyone to go see any of the derbies in either Serbia, Partizan against Red Star, either home game is fine, Olympiacos against Panathinaikos in Athens, Greece. And I was there in Panathinaikos. Some Olympiacos fans will probably hate me now because I would say at Panathinaikos is the fans are closer to the court, so you feel it a lot more. And you see burning, just whatever, fireworks in the crowd. Gym is exploding. Your ears are ringing. Another good derby is in Istanbul, where Fenerbahce plays against Galatasaray.
Yeah, we've been there.
Those are soccer clubs, and Galatasaray, for example, is not in EuroLeague, so they play in a domestic league, and that's the biggest derby because there's soccer enemies. So those experience, I would really urge everybody, all the lifers out there, to go out and seek out and watch. I personally was involved in one. I was still working for CSKA when we played in Turkey at Beşiktaş, and it was an EuroLeague game. The game was going towards the end. We already won the game. It was already, 8-point game or whatever. One of our players, I'm not going to call him out, one of our players decides to dunk the ball with, 2-3 seconds left, and everybody is just grabbing their head and saying, why are you doing this? And as soon as he dunked the ball, the crowd just started booing, just start throwing coins. One of our doctors got slashed with a coin, and his leg was bleeding. And
his leg was bleeding from a coin?
Yeah, it was fire lighters. So we had to all retreat back to our bench with the roofs above the benches where they have just protections, and you hear the coins, everything just flying into the plastic roof. So we had to just go through that little how you call it, that little experience was something special. It was not pleasant, but when you walk out through the tunnel out to the locker rooms, you just cover your head and make sure you don't get anything hit at your head or eyes or something like that. So it's scary, and afterwards it's fun to talk about, but it's not really a pleasant experience when you're in it.
That kind of thing is like, I don't want to say normal, but it can happen over there because the fan bases are just so rabid, right? And because of the history, like you talked about with some of the soccer rivalries, it's not normal, but like it's not like that never happens. If that happened over here, it would be like once in a couple decades, probably. Like that I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine that happening in an NBA arena? Oh my God.
No, well, the Detroit Malice in the Palace, that was something that happened that will probably never happen again.
Yeah.
But if you get fans involved with that's when fans run out on the arena, it's never good, and you probably will not see it in the NBA ever again. Hopefully, we will not see it again.
I don't think it's happening ever again.
In Europe, the fans are so invested emotionally, and especially in Greece, they don't, when they ask the fans, they don't ask you who you're rooting for. They ask you, the question literally translated is who you are. Who are you? So it's basically they're asking for your identity. Are you Panathinaikos? Are you Olympiacos? So it's an indirect question of who you internally represent and feel like. It's a much more identity thing than it is in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. When you've been traveling, what's the longest amount of time that you've been stuck in one place because of flight cancellations or something going on with governments, and because you're navigating that stuff wherever you go, right? So what is a story or maybe the longest amount of time that you've been kind of stuck somewhere and not been able to get to your next destination?
Yeah, so I got two stories to that real quick. The one story was in Turkey at the Turkish Cup. That was about 6 years ago, maybe. And there was a huge snowstorm in Gaziantep. It's at the Syrian border. It's more like the south Turkey. And it was a big snowstorm that they're not used to. First of all, we were driving on the wrong side of the road because the other side of the road was full of snow. They didn't clear it up. And we didn't know we were driving on the other side of the road until we realized there was a car coming from the other side. And
that'll show you real quick what side you're supposed to be on.
Yes, yes. And the flights got delayed at the airport forever, and I couldn't make my connection in Istanbul, so I just arrived the next morning in France, and I went straight to the game, basically to the French Cup, and that was straining because you barely slept. You were just all stuck in the airport, and you had to lay over and waiting forever, and it was pretty tough. Yeah, but in general, the airports are something that it's. Other people drive with Ubers to work, or in Europe, it's more prevalent to maybe drive with a bus. For me, it's a flight. It's like I'm going to work. And the one thing that I always will remember that drives me nuts until this day, I had a clean record of never missing a flight. I had a clean record. I could sleep. I was always very at peace with myself until this one day in Barcelona, where the boarding pass on my phone usually shows when you're boarding. So I was taking my time because I saw the boarding time, and I was not cognizant of what was going on the screen. I was just looking at my boarding pass, digital boarding pass, and that actually had the flight time and not the boarding time. So I get to the gate, and they said the gate is closed, you can't get on. That's it. Everything was empty, and I was sweating. I was sweating. That was my. I look back at it as like my biggest. I don't know, mistake in terms of travel. It was something that will haunt me forever, probably. My clean record is broken.
Well, I don't have a clean record either. I don't know if you've heard this through the grapevine, but I too almost missed a flight one time overseas with the team. I'm not going to go into details here, but this was in Madrid. Let's just say I got to the plane when it was about to take off, and everyone else was already on there. We'll save this one for another day. Our producer is laughing right now because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. But, yeah, I almost...
The question is what happened the night before.
Well, not what you might think. There was an issue with my alarm. Let's put it that way.
All right.
And the phone in the room was unplugged, so no one could call me to get me up. But I made it home safely. Thank God. I made it back. When you're putting together your plan for traveling to all these different countries and trying to figure out who to go see, when to go see them, how do you make those decisions? Because it's not like in the U.S. where there's only a certain amount of collegiate teams, right? There's only a certain amount of NBA teams. There's only so many kids you're going to go look at. You're trying to find that diamond in the rough, and that player could be anywhere outside of the United States. So how do you figure out and put together that plan of where you're going to go and when you're going to go there?
So a lot of times there's not many secrets these days of who is who and who is where, because it's just so available on Twitter, on any kind of websites that you may search for. But you just try to decide if it's worth traveling or not. And the pandemic showed us that it's not always necessary to travel to see 80 prospects, just to chalk them off the list. So you do a lot of film work. You talk to people in those countries. You definitely want to see the main ones that are already known. But some of the guys that are borderline that you feel like that you haven't seen before, you don't know as well. You want to make sure that you're internally at peace with yourself, knowing that player and feeling that you understand who he is. You have to gather the information. So intel gathering becomes an integral part of this job. And it's not only of talking to people about background information. It's or about what the kid is really, what do people think about him in Spain, for example, or France. It's also that you really have to know what this kid is made up of. How does he handle adversity? How does he go through the season? What's the context of that team? Why is he playing a lot? Why is he not playing that much? And what is this role? Some teams trying to promote this player for no reason. He's not that good, but he's playing a whole bunch of minutes, and you're trying to understand. Okay, that's they're trying to push him. They're trying to get the buyout. So you're trying to put everything into perspective and understand the context of it. But that's where I think the network that I've gathered over the last 9 years now is probably the biggest advantage that I've had over the last years, because from year to year it's network effect. And instead of circle of trust, it becomes a triangle of trust. So you don't have to have hundreds of contacts. You just have to have the right ones in the right places. In each country, one or two contacts that you trust 100%, and they trust you. Because I find myself a lot of times, it's under undervalued that I find myself working for them a lot to help them with information about G League players, former G League players, former NBA players, because at some point they will help us, you know? So it's a really very subtle art that I would call it, that you gather information by creating friendships, business friendships, and they become friendships because you start trusting each other on a whole different level. And then when this one person that trusts introduces you to another person that can help you, that person doesn't know the information that you need, he introduces you to a third person, it becomes a triangle of trust. And to me, that happens so many times, and now just a network effect. Everything is basically one phone call away, whether it's China, Australia, or whatever you want to go. It's my WhatsApp is my best friend, basically.
That's where we communicate. Anytime Benas and I hit each other up, unless we run into each other in person, it's over WhatsApp. Those relationships, I actually wanted to ask you about that, and you beat me to it. But how do you develop those? Because in my world, with the people who are working, in front of the camera and reporting and whatnot, you think of the Wojs of the world, the Shamses of the world, like all of these people who have very distinct relationships where they can get information that they need to be able to do their job. I'm just curious from your side on gaining information about players and whatnot. How do you develop these relationships over the course of time so that you do trust each other both ways and kind of know that you're going to help each other out? What goes into that process?
Well, luckily I like coffee, and coffee is a big thing over here. So you call me a coffee savant if you want, but it's a very big thing when you go for coffee meetings or dinners or lunches or whatever. It's casual most of the time, but that's where you build the friendships and the relationships. You develop really, you find out. I open up. I'm an open person generally. I don't mind open up about myself, about my past, about my feelings, and people appreciate it because they see your vulnerability. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable, and then they're not either. So you create a ground for trust on the personal level, and over time you start also trusting them with information about players that that only they may have that information, and they don't want it to get out there, so they protect it, and you protect the sources. You don't tell other people where you heard it from. You share the pieces that you feel that are necessary, and I feel over time there's a spectrum of people, I call it, that I get to know in different cultures, in different countries, that I figure out of how to reach and how to adapt easily to different people. I call it the spectrum of people. And the more I've got to know, the easier it is to connect with them. And over time, it just takes off by itself.
Where do I fall on that spectrum of people, Benas?
Right in the middle, baby.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. Everybody, that's why you call it spectrum. It's a rainbow. Everybody shines in different colors, and you shine very bright.
Oh, I'll take that. I appreciate that. Hey, you mentioned the coffee thing, and I was actually talking to our chief technology officer, Jay Wessel, last night at the arena, and he told me an interesting fact about you is that you find the best coffee shop in every city that you go to. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right,
sir.
So
I have it.
Give me a rundown of your favorite coffee shops in the world, and then you've got to have a favorite one in Boston, right?
Yeah, there's one in close to TD Garden, actually. Cup of Coffee, I think it's called. Cup of
in the North End.
It's right close to the arena.
Yep.
So that's a good one. You caught me at a spot because I have them saved in my Google Maps app. So when I go to Barcelona, for example, I already know I get a hotel that's in between the cafe and the arena. So I really know I can make that walk.
Coffee and basketball, those are the two priorities for you.
Yes. And I visit Begs quite frequently, so I already have the cafes, for example. Back in Black is one good one in Paris that I go to a lot of times. I go back and I'm dressed in black, coincidentally. But there's good cafes in every city. You just have to be cognizant of how to search for them. And there's different apps. For my favorite app, for example, is European Coffee Trip. And they used to have a website, and now they build an app. So if you are in Europe, just download that one. Or I think Beans Finder, I think, is another one that's pretty happy. But I I've made a hobby out of it, and I know how to search them, and I know where they are.
Have you thought about starting a travel agency at any point in your life? Because you know everything about every country. I mean,
Yeah,
now
I
there's
thought
people
about it.
listening that are probably like, man, I wish I could just talk to him. If I go on a trip to Europe, to wherever, to London,
Yeah.
I can ask Benas,
Yeah.
where's the best coffee?
Yes, absolutely. You can absolutely can. I've made already for friends some like a Berlin tour guide, a Paris tour guide. That they told me they're going to Paris, and I just put some places, restaurants, bars, cafes, everything in one place. The main sites. So yeah, it's for me. I haven't thought about being a tour guide or a travel agency, but I thought about being a hotel tester when I retire. Just go around and be a secret agent for some hotel agency that's trying to just investigate how the hotels are working. So I think I have a good nose for that. Right now.
You've got a future in vlogging as well. You can give us all the travel. You could be an influencer on social media. I can't wait for that part of your career.
Why not? Why not? Hey, I'm a hyperactive dude, so I'll probably never stop.
Which is interesting because Danny Ainge, when he was here, and also Austin, they both, like, Austin called you tireless, and I think Danny said it's impossible to tire you out. So both of them have basically said that you just never get tired. How do you go through all these day-to-day workings, and you're traveling and flying and waking up at different hours and going to watch games late at night, watching the Celtics at odd hours of the day? How do you do this and never get tired? How is that even possible? Coffee.
Well, coffee is, there's a baseline that I'm trying to keep. I'm trying not to drink coffee after 2-3 o'clock just because the caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So by the time I go to sleep, I'm trying to have the caffeine down to minimum so I get quality of sleep. I'm really, like I said, cognizant of my health. So I try to fast a lot of times, not to eat too many meals during the day, not to stack too much. I eat a lot of dark chocolate to keep my energy up. And I try not to have high glucose, not to have high glycemic index foods. So I try to stay neutral and try to stay just to have my energy consistent. So I'm just cognizant of that, but I'm not a freak. I used to be very, very extreme. So I'm kind of now going towards the middle and trying to enjoy life at the same time.
Yep.
But also, working out, walking a lot, just to make sure that I'm in shape and just that my brain is working the right way. So I don't watch the Celtics games at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I wake up every morning earlier than I usually wake up, and I watch the games without knowing the result. So that's usually how I watch the Celtics games. That gives me just a start. Maybe I'm just 3-4 hours delayed of knowing the result, but at least I've got my 8 hours of sleep, for example.
Well, you've had a lot of good film to watch this year from the Celtics, that's for sure. We're running out of time here, but I got a couple more things that I want to talk to you about. Number one is the movie Hustle that came out in the last year on Netflix. I know you had to have watched it. I watched it. Probably most of our listeners have watched it. How embellished is that movie about, like, what the real scenarios are overseas with going and trying to find talent?
So I got so many messages about that movie. I got so many friends that I haven't
Adam
heard
Sandler
from
was
in a
playing
while.
you in that movie, right?
Yeah, but I have to say that first of all, my dream is to be in a movie too at some point. I just want to throw it out there.
We'll make that happen.
That's one of my lifetime achievement goals. But the movie is a little bit of a mix of what it is to be like to be an agent and a scout, because normally you can't mentor a prospect. You can't be that close to a prospect. You're observing him. You're working for somebody that you are not allowed to represent, and he was representing him in certain ways. So there's a little bit of a tweak, but I like the fact that what made it close to my story is that he was also an assistant coach that go to scout. There was an assistant coach again. And that's where people that were texting me, that reminded them of me, because I'm shifting back and forth between those roles with the national team and the Celtics. So there's a little bit of both in there, but the story itself is not necessarily all about the scout.
Well, Benas, if you wind up finding us that diamond in the rough that winds up becoming the best player ever in the NBA, something tells me that you will get that movie about yourself. And maybe you'll be able to play yourself in the movie.
I prefer not to play myself. I prefer to be a crazy Jim Carrey impersonator or something like that.
Who would play you then?
I don't need a story. My story is already just legendary. It doesn't need to be emphasized. The people know. I want to shoot a movie where I'm a Jim Carrey type of character, and I just can act a little bit crazy here and there.
Fair enough. All right. Last topic that I want to hit you on is your communication back here with the basketball operations group, and obviously that's switched over in the last couple of years. It had been run by Danny Ainge. Now it's being run by Brad Stevens. And to me, the fact that you're still here is a testament to the work that you provide to the team, that we were able to kind of switch regimes in the brains that are running this whole thing. And both of them wanted you to be an integral part of it. But what is so congratulations on that, by the way, just the work that you provided the organization and for them to value as much as they do. But what is the communication like on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis with Brad Stevens, Mike Zarin, Austin Ainge, all of these people back in the States who you're providing a lot of the information you're collecting, you're providing it to them?
Right. So it's been different in the sense where I don't want to overflow information to people where it's not necessary to have it right now. It's not an urgent business, so it's something that I'm in constant contact with Austin. That's my primary contact that I communicate with before I go to trips, or when I go to trips. I send out information to the whole group that I gather when I watch games, when I watch scouts, when I scout games, or when I gather intel. But like Brad doesn't need to hear the day-to-day. He needs to hear the essentials, So I'm trying to filter out, just as I used to filter out as an assistant coach for the head coach, the information that's necessary to know for him without overflowing and overloading him with information, because Brad has to deal with a whole bunch of other things. So if there's anything that's urgent or that's interesting for him to watch, to take a look at, or, Beggs had a great game, or Madar had a good game, just those little things I think are necessary for him to know, but everything else, it just goes with the flow. And whenever approaching to the draft, that's when things are, when you have to come ready to play.
You just mentioned them. That was the last thing I wanted to talk to you about. We got Yam, we've got Juhann over in Europe. What are those guys looking at right now, and how's their seasons going? And what do we think that those guys might be able to provide in the years to come to the Celtics organization?
So Yam is playing in Partizan with the Serbian team that I mentioned earlier, and he's playing in the EuroLeague. He's got a really important defensive role. He's always pressuring the ball. He's always providing the team with energy. And the team has been, up and down. They have one of the best coaches, most accomplished coaches in Europe, Coach Obradovic.
Yeah.
So he's in really good hands to become the best possible player he can become going forward. And I expect him to just keep growing, keep getting better, keep getting stronger. He's gonna get there eventually. Beggs is currently he had a sprained ankle, which was unfortunate, but we all had those. It was nothing that was really of big. He's already close to returning. He was already traveled with the team and is getting ready to get back. He's made a jump forward with his confidence and on defense, on how much energy he provides on the passing lanes. He's just playing with so much more authority than he did before. And his role changed with the new coach, because now they have Will Weaver, American coach, who used to be an assistant coach with the Rockets. And he's preparing him to what kind of role he would have in the NBA, just coming off the bench, coming sometimes just starting as well, but coming with the energy on defense and making plays in transitional offense whenever the opportunities arrive. That's where he's at his best. So I enjoy watching both those kids play, and I watched them improve over the last couple of years.
Yeah, Juhann, I was excited to see Juhann when he came over here and played in Summer League. I cannot believe how much of a man he looks like at his age.
Yes.
He is a big-bodied, defensive-minded guy. I'll be looking forward to seeing if and when he makes it over here to play for the team. And same thing with Yam. He had some really good moments when he came over in Summer League, and those guys are growing. And I know you had a pretty big role in those guys landing here. So we're looking forward to seeing if those guys can come over here and provide to the team. Before we let you go, I know you got a podcast that you run on your own, so give yourself a plug. Let everyone know what's the podcast name. Where can they find it?
Shameless plug over here by me.
Not shameless at all.
Actually,
Come on.
No, it's just basically called the Benas podcast, and it's a podcast where we don't talk about the day to day. I want it to be evergreen, evergreen. I
love it.
I preferred for it to last forever. It's more of a Tim Ferriss style podcast where I try to talk to coaches, assistant coaches, commentators, different professions in the business, and talk about the nuances behind the scenes of how they prepare themselves, what kind of just the technicalities of it. And communication is a big topic, how to communicate with players properly, or how the relationship building goes. And I'm slowly going into other sports as well. So I had a former rugby player on, I had a boxer on. So I'm trying to also explore how their minds work, how the preparation process is, how they deal with adversity and things like that. Approaching retirement for players, for example, I think is a big thing of the transition process from player to a new identity, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about all those little things that I think are under-discussed and under the radar, and I'm trying to bring it up to the top, and hopefully people enjoy it.
Oh, I know. I've enjoyed it. I recommend everyone out there to give it a listen. Like, you're one of the most interesting people who works for the Celtics. Your role, your communication, the way you see things, and being able to listen to you kind of dive into that stuff on your podcast is just awesome. So congrats on that. Thank you for coming on. I know everyone's going to enjoy this conversation. And when will I be seeing you back in Boston? When's the next time?
I'll be back in March, but the team will not be in town, so I don't know if I'll see you.
All right. Well, let's meet up for maybe a cup of coffee. Your favorite spot.
Not maybe,
All right.
for sure.
It's on me. It's on me.
Okay.
All right, Benas, man.
All right.
Thanks for coming on, and we look forward to seeing you in March.
Thanks for having me. Thanks again. See you soon.